Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me for more SPTV, where every day is a great day not to be in a cult. Guys, I am so unbelievably thrilled to be able to share with you guys that the Father's Son that we were looking for last night was found, has been found. When I say found, the Father hasn't seen his son in 14 years because the son disappeared into Scientology. The son is 28 years old. The father this is in Australia. The father regularly goes into the local Scientology organization looking for the son. In 14 years, he's not been able to find him. I want to give a shout out to, let me put my stuff on Do Not Disturb here. I want to give a shout out to the channel that did a short interview with this father, Aussie Nathan. This is the channel. Aussie Nathan is one of the live streaming protest channels, and Aussie Nathan is in Sydney, Australia. If you're not familiar, if you want to follow his stuff, follow him on YouTube. That's the channel right there. Here is let me share this. The sound is off on this, but this is a clip of the footage where Aussie Nathan was interviewing the father. And the father told this heartbreaking story of having his two boys, his two sons, who lived with him. He was divorced from their mother, lived with him for many, many years. The son was in a bad water skiing accident, had gotten hit by a boat. And the son needed to stay in a place that had a first floor bedroom. And the father's place only had second floor bedrooms. And so the son went to go stay with the mother during the recuperation period. And the mother had married a Scientologist. And so both of the boys got into Scientology. And somewhere along the line, the boys were brainwashed into thinking that their father was a suppressive person who should be disconnected from. And I want to say right at the outset that to Aussie, I want to make sure I don't mispronounce the channel name, to Aussie Nathan. If you have a way to reach that father, if you, I'm assuming maybe you got an email address or a phone number or something. And if that father wants to be in touch with me and wants to come on and do a chat with me about how Scientology wreaked this havoc in his family, if he wants to, please pass on my information to him or his information on to me. And I want to talk about the pros and cons of doing something like that. Let me make a note so that I don't forget. Because the thing is, we found where the son is, what he's doing, and that he's okay. That doesn't mean the son's going to reconnect with the father. But I think it is possible. It depends on how it's handled. And I want to talk about that a little bit. But here's the thing. The son, the name is Steve Szabo. Szabo. I think last night I was thinking it was Zava. Zava. It's actually Szabo. Steve Szabo. His birth name is Steve O'Brien. That's his birth name. That's his father's last name. But after the whole disconnection thing happened, and by the way, it seems like the disconnection wasn't official. It doesn't even seem like the kids were made to like officially write the father a disconnection letter. They just pretty much cut him out of their lives. The mother's maiden name is Szabo. That's where it comes from. So he currently goes by Steve, Szabo. He is a Sea Org member. This is one of the reasons why the father has not been able to find him or locate him. And I suspected this. I knew this, and I mentioned that in the video last night. It sounds like the younger brother, Steve, is a Sea Org member. It sounds like the older brother, whose name I don't know, is not a Sea Org member, but is a Scientologist, because the father said that he hasn't been able to find Steve in 14 years. And the older brother won't talk to the father because if he does, the mother will disconnect. Anyway, I was right. Steve O'Brien, aka Steve Szabo, is a Sea Org member at the advanced organization, Scientology's advanced organization in Sydney, Australia. He is an executive. His post is COPE officer. In normal world language, that's basically the deputy HR director. And in a large organization, it's an important post. in Scientology, they can make any post sound like it's unimportant. But COPE officer is basically the deputy HR manager. And in any decent size, respectable Sea organization, COPE officer is an important post. By the way, in this language, COPE, it's so weird when L. Ron Hubbard used this. COPE, you go COPE officer. What does that mean? It's literally the same word as cope, like coping, like barely surviving, like managing to get by, like no matter what. That is the actual word in this post title, COPE officer. Why he didn't just call it the deputy? Well, I don't want to use other Scientology words. Like for every other division of the Scientology organizing board, the deputy division head is simply called the deputy, whatever the name of the division head. So if you've got your dissemination secretary, you could have a deputy dissemination secretary. The technical secretary, you could have the deputy technical secretary. But for some reason, in a Scientology org board, you have the HCO, the Hubbard Communications Office Area Secretary, and then the deputy is called the COPE officer. Okay, so that is Steve's job. And the father could walk into the advanced organization. Advanced organization in Scientology lingo is an organization that delivers the upper confidential secret levels called the OT levels, the operating thetan levels. That's where you learn about Xenu and the body thetans and the thetan clusters and getting blown up in volcanoes with hydrogen bombs, 76 million years ago or something like that. The good stuff, as they call it. So the father could walk into the advanced organization in Sydney, known in Scientology as AOSH ANZO, and say, I'm here to see my son, Steve Szabo, the COPE officer. And some heads would explode. Guys, I have to say, it is amazing how many under-the-radar Scientologists, Scientology staff members, and, I kid you not, Scientology Sea Org members are secretly watching all of our videos. I was reached out to by so many people who had personal knowledge of Steve Szabo. I was reached out to by people in all three of those categories. Under the radar Scientologists, Scientology staff members, and Scientology Sea Org members. I love it every time it happens. I know that when I even say that I was contacted by some Sea Org members, there are some people who are going to go, oh my God, you can't say that. You're going to direct the Scientologists to the leak. Guys, Scientology destroys Scientology more than anything else. Getting Scientology to do these witch hunts and chase their tails and look for spies everywhere is the best thing that we collectively can do to accelerate Scientology's creation of its own demise. It is those types of witch hunts that make Sea Org members and staff members go, I ain't putting up with this shit anymore. It is just those types of pointless and needless, lengthy, endless interrogations trying to get staff members and Sea Org members to spill their guts and give up their crimes. I mean, even to the extent of having, people who were born and raised in Scientology being interrogated about whether they are plants who've been sent in by the CIA, the FBI, the DEA, Big Pharma. I mean, I'm not kidding. I'm genuinely not kidding. This is the type of witch hunts that occur. And so I don't really care whether Scientology believes who contacted me or doesn't who contacted me or didn't contact me. I don't care. I just enjoy letting everyone know how much pleasure I get whenever I get a little bit more of a glimpse into how many Scientologists, staff members, and Sea Org members secretly watch our videos. And it's one of the reasons I do so many videos, and I sort of encourage other people to do so many videos, is I'm like, they're watching, guys. They're watching. Give them something to watch. Okay, now Steve is married. He's married to an auditor who also works at AOSH ANZO. By the way, AOSH stands for Advanced Org and Saint Hill. And like I said, an advanced org is just an org that delivers the OT levels. And St. Hill refers to an org that delivers the Class 6 auditor course in Scientology called the St. Hill Special Briefing Course, which doesn't even exist right now, thanks to David Miscavige. Okay, so let's say if someone were to ask the question, what is the best way for this dad to actually reconnect with his son? I have so many thoughts on this. Or what can the dad do to get his son out of Scientology? I'm reminded of similar requests I've received in the past from family members who were no longer Scientologists or even never were, who had kids that are in the Sea Org. I go, what can I do to get my kid out of the Sea Org? The easiest answer, and it requires, a certain amount of courage, and it depends on what you want your long-term relationship with your estranged son or daughter to be. But the easiest way to get your son or your daughter kicked out of the Sea Org is to be an absolute public nightmare. To speak publicly. Now, in the past, that meant speaking to the press, but these days we have YouTube, and YouTube has a greater reach than the press anyway, for the most part. The absolute best way is to be an unmitigated nightmare, a PR nightmare for Scientology, so that it's easier for them to be like, Steve, you got to go, bro. We don't need this headache. Go on channels, do interviews, talk to the press. I bet the Sydney press would love to hear this story. Now you go, but wait a second. They didn't let Mike Rinder's son leave. Very true. David Miscavige is very intentionally trying to punish Mike Rinder by keeping his son instead of letting his son leave. When I was in the Sea Org in Los Angeles, I remember there was two people, Kim Ford and George Ford. Very well-liked Sea Org members, young Sea Org members, young-ish, late 20s, early 30s, whatever. They'd been in the Sea Org for a long, long time. They were considered high producers. They were considered upstanding examples. Like George might have even been an officer. For the Sea Org, that matters. Normal. It's just fake. It's just the fake space Navy, guys. It doesn't mean anything in the real world to be an officer in Scientology's Sea Org. But in the Sea Org, it's important. It's a big deal. I think Kim might have been an officer as well. And one of their parents, it wasn't both of their parents, but one of their parents started publicly attacking in the press. And Kim and George were instantly deemed unqualified for the Sea Org and offloaded. It's like one of the fast tracks out of the Sea Org. And so if Steve Zava's father started really making a public stink, not even about like laws have been broken or anything, but just like, this is how Scientology destroys families. Scientology stole my kids from me. They brainwashed my kids. This is why kids should never be in Scientology. My son was brainwashed into joining Scientology. He was like 14 years old when he got into Scientology. By the time he was 16, he'd been married off to another Scientologist. And now he's 28, and he's an executive at Scientology's advanced base in Sydney, Australia, having severed all ties with his father. I would, if I had a chance to talk to Steve Zava's dad, one of the things I would really like to learn about is, what was it that how was Scientology able to brainwash his kids into thinking he was a suppressive person not worthy of connection? Did he ever say anything negative about Scientology? Like using Steve's father's story as a real life example, yet another real life example of how exactly this happens in Scientology as a cautionary tale. Now, so if Steve's father were to start, being a nightmare to Scientology, and if Steve was then offloaded from the Sea Org, you might go, well, shit, his son would probably hate him for that, and he'd probably never be in touch with him again. And that's a very real possibility. And that's why I said in the beginning, to take this approach, you have to know what you're doing. You have to know how the various ways it might turn out, and you have to be okay with that. If you're not okay with the worst case scenario, don't do it. But I look at it this way. He already hasn't seen his son in 14 years. If his son stays in Scientology, he's not going to see his son for another 14 years. So depending on how you think about it, the best thing he could do for his son is get his son kicked out, whether that results in him reconnecting with his son or not. That's how I tend to think about it. And I could understand other perspectives on it, you know. You never quite know how it's going to go. But I'll tell you one thing I did learn today in speaking with some of the people who know Steve. Was an interesting little piece of information showing the absolute demise of Scientology in Australia. You realize Sydney is the capital of Scientology in Australia. The Continental Management Sea Org unit is also located in Sydney, in addition to the Advanced Org and St. Hill located in Sydney. Back in the day, maybe, not that long ago, maybe early 2000s-ish, for example, but by way of comparison compared to today, is that event attendance quotas, when they were having a mandatory international event hosted by David Miscavige, all people were supposed to come and watch the video of David Miscavige addressing all Scientologists from stage. Event attendance was expected to be 1,000 people. Today, as we speak, today, 400 people attending a mandatory David Miscavige international event is considered good attendance. Now, guys, I'm not good at math. You don't have to tell me twice. That's not good. I always get, so if you go from 100, that's more than, if you're down, is that 60% down? Is that a 60% drop? I think it's a 60% drop. So let's just say, just for the sake of casually using loose numbers here, over a 20-year period, Scientology has declined by 60%. And one of the reasons I like, yes, 60%, thank you, chat, is that's not just one org. There's probably more Scientologists, like if you were to take all the Scientologists in Australia, I don't know, I'd bet 80 to 90% of all the Scientologists are in Sydney. There's a ton of tiny orgs in Australia. There's a surprising number of orgs, but very tiny, tiny orgs in Australia, in far-flung cities that you'd never guess. But I would guess 80 to 90% of all Scientologists in Australia are in Sydney. So when we're talking about event attendance for Sydney, we're almost talking about event attendance for all Australia. And so a number like that of event attendance being down by 60%, that's a very real number. Amazing. So, Steve's father, if you're out there, I hope this information is helpful to you. I hope you will go into the Advanced Org in Sydney and say, I'm here to see my son. Make them make you leave. Show what a horrible, disgusting, family-destroying cult Scientology really is. And if you really want to show it, just go in by yourself. Don't go in with a camera. Don't have someone following you with a camera, because you're just begging for them to have it. You're just handing them a reason to kick you out. Make them kick you out just for being a concerned father who showed up to speak to his son. Because I think they will kick you out. And part of what I relish doing and part of what I do on this channel is just try to shine as bright of a light as possible on just how horrible and destructive Scientology really is. But it would also be great if they actually let you talk to him. I mean, I would, that in the way I think about it, that would be an even better outcome. And so that's why I personally get so excited at the idea of you knowing where he is and having an opportunity to do this. Because, what's the best case scenario? What's the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario is you have a perfect opportunity to show what a horrible, destructive, family-destroying cult Scientology is in real time. And the best case scenario is you actually get to see your son. So what do you have to lose? So I hope I hope that you do that. And if you want to talk to me, my email is growingupinscientology@gmail.com. And if you want to chat with me about how all this happened and anything else, I would love to do that. All right, let's see. I do not have Barb in the back office starring things, so I do not have any comments starred, guys. So sorry about that. But that's really all I have to say about this for right now. Much more to come later today, guys. You don't want to miss this. So hit that like button for me if you don't mind. Hit that subscribe button if you're not yet subscribed. Thank you to everybody who watches until the very end, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not,